The change in Emily and Daniel's marriage did not arrive with an argument or a dramatic moment. It arrived quietly, slipping into their lives like a shadow at dusk, almost invisible at first. Emily noticed it on an ordinary Sunday morning in their Toronto apartment, where the city sounds floated through the window and the smell of fresh coffee filled the small kitchen. Daniel sat across from her at the table, holding his mug with both hands, his eyes resting on her face longer than usual. He was not angry, not cold, just thoughtful in a way that made Emily uneasy. She spoke about her plans for the day, about work, about small things, but Daniel listened without interrupting, nodding slowly, as if he were studying her rather than sharing the moment with her. Emily felt a strange distance between them, not measured by space but by silence. Over the past few weeks, these moments had become frequent. Daniel watched her when she got dressed, when she laughed at her phone, when she stared out the window lost in thought. It was not a look of suspicion or control, it was softer, heavier, filled with unspoken questions. Emily tried to ignore it at first, telling herself that long marriages naturally change, that comfort sometimes replaces passion. Yet deep inside, something felt different. She remembered how Daniel used to talk endlessly about his day, how they would argue and laugh in the same breath, how he once looked at her like she was the only person in the room. Now, he seemed present but distant, as if he were afraid to step too close. Emily herself was changing too, though she did not fully realize it yet. After years of putting her own dreams aside, she had recently started feeling a quiet restlessness, a desire to reconnect with parts of herself she had ignored. She had not told Daniel everything she felt, not because she wanted to hide it, but because she was still trying to understand it herself. That morning, when Daniel stood up to rinse his cup, Emily watched him walk away and felt a sudden ache in her chest, a fear that they were slowly drifting into separate emotional worlds. She wanted to ask him what he was thinking, why his eyes followed her like that, but the words stayed trapped in her throat. Instead, she smiled, pretending nothing was wrong, and Daniel smiled back, pretending the same. The day moved on quickly, filled with errands and routine, yet the tension lingered beneath every conversation. Daniel noticed how Emily seemed more confident lately, how her posture had changed, how her voice sounded firmer when she spoke. He admired it, but it scared him too. He wondered if she still needed him in the same way, if her growth meant he was becoming less important in her life. He never said these fears out loud. Instead, he watched, hoping to find reassurance in her actions, hoping to see proof that she was still his wife in the same way she always had been. Emily, on the other hand, felt his gaze like a quiet pressure, making her feel both seen and misunderstood. She was not planning to leave, not seeking anything outside her marriage, yet she sensed that Daniel believed something was slipping through his fingers. As evening fell and city lights flickered on, they sat together on the couch, close but not touching, the television playing softly in the background. Emily leaned her head back, exhausted, and for a brief moment, Daniel reached out as if to hold her hand, then stopped. That small pause spoke louder than words. Emily turned to look at him, searching his face for clarity, but Daniel looked away, lost in thought. Neither of them knew it yet, but this quiet distance was the beginning of a turning point, one that would test their love, their fears, and their willingness to truly see each other again. Daniel never planned to become a silent observer in his own marriage, but fear has a way of changing people before they understand what is happening. As Emily's life began to fill with new energy, Daniel felt himself falling into the role of someone standing on the edge, watching rather than joining. It started when Emily began spending her evenings at a local art center, helping organize small community events and workshops. She returned home tired but bright, her face lit with purpose, speaking quickly about ideas, people, and moments that made her feel alive. Daniel listened from the sofa, asking questions but choosing his words carefully, afraid that one wrong sentence might reveal how insecure he felt. He noticed how Emily walked differently now, with more confidence, how she chose her clothes with care, not to impress anyone but to express herself. These changes should have made him happy, and in many ways they did, but they also reminded him of something painful. Emily had once put her own dreams aside for him, and now she was reclaiming them. That truth made him proud, but it also made him wonder if he still fit into the life she was building. Daniel remembered the early years of their marriage, when Emily leaned on him for reassurance, when he felt needed in ways that gave him comfort and identity. Now, she seemed stronger, more certain, and Daniel worried that her strength meant she no longer needed him the same way. Instead of speaking openly, he chose silence, convincing himself that watching would help him understand her better. He paid attention to every detail, from the way she smiled when talking about her work to the way she grew quiet late at night, staring at her phone or the ceiling. He searched her behavior for signs that she was drifting away or, hopefully, signs that she was still anchored to him. The more he watched, the more trapped he felt in his own thoughts. His mind filled with questions he was afraid to ask. Was she happy with him, or just comfortable? Was her new life pulling her somewhere he could not follow? Emily noticed his distance but did not know its cause. One evening, as she talked about a project she was excited about, she suddenly stopped and looked at him closely. His eyes held a mix of admiration and worry, and she felt a sharp ache in her chest. She asked him why he looked at her like that, her voice calm but searching. Daniel froze, caught between honesty and fear. After a long pause, he admitted that he was trying to understand who she was becoming. The words landed heavily between them. Emily felt seen, yet misunderstood, as if her growth had been turned into a threat instead of a shared journey. That night, they went to bed without resolving anything. Daniel lay awake, listening to her breathing, realizing that his silence was slowly building walls instead of answers. He understood, deep down, that watching her from a distance would never bring him peace, but he did not yet know how to step closer without risking everything he feared losing. Emily did not pull away after that heavy conversation. Instead, something inside her shifted, and she decided to face the quiet tension with awareness rather than fear. She stopped waiting for Daniel to explain himself and began to truly observe him, not with suspicion, but with care. She noticed how he moved through the apartment as if trying not to disturb anything, how he fixed small problems around the house late at night, tightening loose handles, organizing shelves, repairing things that did not really need repair. She saw him standing alone on the balcony, looking out at the city lights with a tired expression, his phone in his hand but rarely used. Daniel spoke less about his own day now, choosing instead to ask about hers, and Emily realized that he was giving her space while quietly shrinking his own. The thought hurt her more than anger ever could. As days passed, Emily became more present at home, not to limit herself, but to reassure him without words. She sat beside him during dinner, touched his arm when she passed by, asked him questions she had not asked in months. Daniel responded slowly, cautiously, as if unsure whether he was allowed to step back into the closeness they once shared. One evening, Emily joined him on the balcony without announcing herself. The air was cool, the city calm, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. She watched his shoulders relax just by her presence, and that small reaction told her everything she needed to know. Daniel was not distant because he no longer cared, he was distant because he cared too much and did not know how to protect his heart. After a long silence, he admitted that he was afraid she would no longer need him, that her growth made him feel invisible. His voice was quiet, but the honesty behind it was heavy. Emily listened without interrupting, understanding now that while Daniel had been watching her, he had also been doubting himself. She reached for his hand and told him that her desire to grow did not mean she wanted to leave, that finding herself again did not erase what they had built together. She explained that love, to her, meant choosing each other even as they changed. Daniel listened, really listened, and for the first time in weeks, his eyes softened. In that moment, Emily realized that watching someone with love required courage, not distance, and she promised herself that she would no longer let fear create silence between them. As they stood there together, city lights reflecting in their eyes, Emily understood that this turning point was not about who was stronger or who needed whom more, but about learning to see each other clearly again, without assumptions, without fear, and with the honesty their marriage deserved. The days that followed did not bring sudden perfection, but they brought movement, and that alone changed everything between Emily and Daniel. They began speaking more openly, not in long emotional speeches, but in simple, honest sentences that cleared the air little by little. Daniel stopped observing from a distance and started participating again, joining Emily in her routines, asking real questions, sharing his own thoughts without fear of sounding weak. Emily, in return, made space for him, not by limiting her growth, but by inviting him into it. They went on long walks through familiar streets, talked about dreams they had once buried, and laughed at memories that reminded them why they had chosen each other in the first place. Daniel watched Emily now with admiration rather than worry, seeing her confidence as something beautiful, not threatening. Emily watched Daniel soften, noticing how he smiled more, how his voice carried warmth again, how he no longer looked away when emotions surfaced. One quiet evening, sitting together in their living room, Daniel admitted that he no longer felt like he was standing on the outside of her life. Emily told him that love, for her, had always been about sharing growth, not stopping it. That simple exchange became a turning point, sealing an understanding that had taken years to form. They accepted that marriage was not about staying the same, but about choosing to walk together even as each person evolved. Their connection grew calmer, deeper, rooted in respect rather than fear. In watching each other with intention and care, they rediscovered trust, and with it, a renewed sense of closeness that felt mature and steady. As time passed, the tension that once filled their home faded into quiet confidence. They no longer watched each other to search for loss, but to appreciate presence. In that shared awareness, Emily and Daniel found something stronger than the past version of their love, a partnership that allowed them to grow, change, and still remain side by side, fully seen, fully chosen, and fully committed to the life they continued to build together.